Part of the national security strategy that just came up, basically a line said that Washington's, and I don't know, I hope I don't get this wrong, but Washington's hectoring of Gulf monarchies has got to stop. How do you, I mean, that must be welcome to your ears, obviously, because it doesn't really talk about human rights and democracy, but it does talk about a lot of what we know that President Trump has always talked about, which is the economy, investment, business, transactions, those kinds of things. You've sat with a lot of US negotiators. You recently, most recently over the Israel ceasefire in Gaza with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. How does that type of negotiation differ from potentially your interlocutors before?
Well, actually, it's first of all, I think that each conflict has its own nature, and we cannot compare like what's the mediation, for example, between the U.S. and Afghanistan to the mediation between Israel and Hamas, and that happened recently. And basically, what we have seen as a challenge in the recent mediation in Gaza was that there were only the U.S. as part of mediation. They were only talking to one party, which is the Israelis. But in the recent rounds of the negotiations, they started engaging with both parties, which has helped us in making breakthroughs in these negotiations and achieving the ceasefire at that time. The difference, of course, between one administration to another, it's been always there. Like, it's not you cannot see one method that's followed by every administration. But what we have seen throughout the mediation process is an engagement and a willingness to push to the finish line, to get it done, and not to keep it open. Now, we are at a critical moment. It's not yet there. So it's what we have just done is a pause. We cannot consider it yet a ceasefire. A ceasefire cannot be completed unless there is a full withdrawal of the Israeli forces, there is stability back in Gaza, people can go in and out, which is not the case today. Right now, us as Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, together with the United States, we are getting together in order to force the way forward for the next phase. And this next phase is just also temporary from our perspective, because at the end of the day, if we are looking at, if we are just resolving what happened in Gaza, the catastrophe that happened in the last 2 years, it's not enough, because there is a root for this conflict. And this conflict is not only about Gaza, it's about the West Bank, it's about the rights of the Palestinians for their states. So we are hoping that we can work together with the US administration to achieve this vision at the end of the day. It's not easy, it will have a lot of challenges, it will face a lot of attacks, but we will keep pushing in order to find at the end of the day a long-lasting solution that provides justice for both people.
In the ceasefire agreement and in the 20-point plan for Israel-Gaza, there was an indication that there would be an effort to move towards a Palestinian state. For the second time this year, the Israeli Knesset basically, well, they don't want that to happen, and actually Prime Minister Netanyahu and his far-right allies boycotted a vote that was to move the phases along because of the reference in the plan to the two-state solution. When you're talking about mediation, how do you get beyond that kind of ideology? How do you get beyond the hard, liners who don't want even what President Trump has put forward?
Well, actually, here where the enforcement is needed, because one of the lessons learned that we have seen and experienced throughout the last 2 years, that if accountability is absent and enforcement is absent, things can just keep going and we remain hostage in the hands of the extremists. And that's what we want to avoid. And we have seen that the efforts that all of us, we put together in order to reach to the ceasefire that we have achieved this year, needed for the next phase, which is the stabilization, and then the third phase, which is the Palestinian state. If this extremist agenda will just, overshadow all our efforts as an international community, then everyone is recognizing that there is something wrong with the structure that we are working through. And I believe that U.S. role is key in this because U.S. has the enforcement part of that in order to put this conflict on the right track for resolution.
Foreign Minister Fidan, I want to ask you about this because it's also about a stabilization force. The UN Security Council, I think for the first time in my memory, well, recent memory, with consensus and unanimity, voted for the Trump peace plan. One of the main objectives early on is a stabilization force. What can you tell us about how that's going to get beyond the blocks? I mean, first of all, Hamas is still not demilitarized, and there is a de facto partition inside Gaza, the so-called yellow line. And as we've seen and we've heard from Foreign Minister, there's no movement towards this second phase. I mean, is Turkey willing to put troops on the ground for a stabilization force? Would that be acceptable to any party?
Well, first of all, Turkey is ready and willing to do whatever it takes for us to contribute to the ongoing peace efforts that everybody is collectively contributing. And in terms of ISF, still there is a big discussion taking place, how to form and what are the specific mission statements and what will be the rules of engagements. I think when we define the mission of ISF, we should be realistic and nuanced in expecting certain things from ISF because there are realities in the field. And I think our first objective in deploying ISF should be is to separate Palestinians from the Israelis on borderline. This should be our main objective. Then we can address the other remaining issues. And whatever ISF is going to do is also be supplemented by other entities like the police force that is going to be vetted and trained. And then also we will have a Palestinian local administration. And then we will have a peace board. Now all these organs supposedly will work together in a synchronized manner. When we have this system more or less in place, I think we can be much more realistic in expecting from ISF. But as I said, there is a big challenge for ISF either because the formation of the ISF, which countries will be contributing, this is a big question now, and what will be the command structure, what will be the logistics. Thousands of detailed questions are in place, but this is up to our military commanders. But then what will be the first mission? I think once we deploy ISF, the rest will come.
Once you deploy yourself, that's the key. I'll come back to you, Kaja Kallas, but I want to ask you as Foreign Minister, I guess one of the questions is, you were one of the first countries, along with Ireland and Norway, to recognize a Palestinian state. And there was a whole load of brouhaha in the world saying that this would just reward terrorism, that it wouldn't advance, the peaceful resolution of all of this. And I wonder whether you think that gave your countries leverage in this process or not, because right now, as you know, there is a massive crackdown by the Israeli forces and settlers backed by the Israeli state against Palestinians in the West Bank, as well as the unresolved issues in Gaza. I mean, people, as you've seen, still living in the rubble, aid still not going in sufficient quantities, and no movement towards the second phase, as far as we can gather. So tell me, and I'm talking about mediation and leverage now, what leverage do you think your declaration, which was then amplified at the UN by many more countries, what did that do?
It's very clear that to work for peace, and in the Middle East, peace means the two-state solution with a real and viable Palestinian state living in good neighborhood with the Israeli state gives you leverage. Working for peace always gives you leverage. At the time, some people criticized us, say that we were alone, that it was a void movement. When we see the wave of recognition that came right after, with many members that are permanent members of the Security Council, you realized that we were not alone, we were the first, and we were leading the way towards what we all know, including the Israeli people, that is the real path for security and for peace for both Palestinians and Israelis. We did the recognition because of justice, because it's justice for the Palestinian people. I don't see why in the world we would assume that the Palestinian people is the only people in the world that are eternally condemned to be a people of refugees. We did it because of peace, because we will never accept that the only way to relate between Palestinian and Israelis or among people in the Middle East is through violence. Why we Europeans could create the European Union, and instead of making war with your neighbor, and it was the border was almost a curse for us in Europe, and we turned it into cooperation. Why it couldn't be the same thing in the Middle East? We are also in favor of normalization of relation of the Arab countries with Israel. And we did it also because of pure humanity. When you see 70,000 Palestinians being killed in front of your eyes, in front of your TV screen, children's babies, and when you believe in the United Nations Charter, in the principles and values that founded the European Union, you cannot be moved. You have to do something. On Wednesday in Madrid, we are going to receive Mahmoud Abbas, and we are going to convey the same message. It's time to work to put in place a real Palestinian state. And that means the West Bank and Gaza under one single Palestinian authority. We have to stop the violence of those settlers that is really out of way. And we have to stop all those illegal settlements that are spreading. We have to go for reconstruction in Gaza. And the day we will have one single Palestinian authority that will control the West Bank and Gaza connected by a corridor with an exit to the sea and its capital in East Jerusalem, living in good neighborhood with Israel, I think that day we will have achieved what Europe stands for, and it's peace and the respect of international law and international humanitarian law.
Kaja Kallas, can I ask you, we're going back to the European war right now, or the war on the European continent. The 28-point plan that President Trump put forth